Good afternoon, and welcome to the third day of the 18th International Youth Conference called European Values for the Future of Southeastern European Countries. And this is the second session and last session for today. My name is Dimitar Nizamovski. I come from the Youth Educational Forum, and I will be your host for today's event. And we'll go through moderating on all the session and the key speakers tonight. So this session is called Future of Education, New Opportunities or New Dividing Lines. And we'll go through some of the key aspects of education as one of the most crucial pillars when it comes to all societies in the region and in the world as well. But first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Youth Alliance Kruševo for inviting me personally and to give credit to all the cooperation between Youth Educational Forum and Youth Alliance from Kruševo. In the couple of last years, we have worked on very interesting projects, and this is some of the successes that we have had in the past few years. So I'm very honored to be here and to be your host for today's session. You know, just to get into the format of the whole session at hand, we will have two subtopics where we'll discuss with four incredible speakers that I will now announce. So we'll have Mr. Adrian Barbaros, who is a board member of OBESU, then followed by Mr. Oltion Rumbulaku. The third speaker will be Ms. Professor Ala Apopei, and then the fourth one will be Mr. Hristo Panchugov. I will go further into details as I will be announcing them. But first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here, and I would like to encourage you to take part in the discussions, to pose some questions and give some comments of your own, whether that would be from your own personal perspective, whether that would be from the line of work that you have done, or some comparative experiences from across Europe or all over the world. Feel free to discuss some of the most burning issues that are concerning all of us, all the region and all the countries that are here at stake. So, you know, education has been one of the key pillars in all of the societies, and it is one of the most crucial factors that has a contributing factor towards the personal development of the young people in general. And to be honest, when we look at some of the data and the facts of the World Bank, in the past 10 years, the situation in the region has not been the most bright one. So there is always room for improvement, especially when it comes to, on one hand, we have the formal education, and then on the other, we have the non-formal education. And how can we combine when it comes to the future, you know, how to have these joint efforts of all the stakeholders, whether that would be the students, the unions, the institutions such as the Ministry of Education, Science, Youth, and Sport, whether that would be the schools, higher education, secondary and primary as well. So how can we attract all of these forces and combine them into improving the state, the current state? And this year, as we are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had some serious issues and challenges as well when it comes to dealing with all these issues. So at one hand, we have to look at the current state and the current challenges, but then again, we would have to move forward and predict maybe what are the key aspects that we would like to address and the issues that are at hand when it comes in the next 5 or 10 years. So we'll look into that, and I hope to have a very fruitful discussion, and I encourage you once again to get involved. So I would like to announce the first speaker for today, Mr. Adrian Barbaros, who is a board member of OBESU, which is the organizing bureau of European School Student Unions. And all of the key speakers will have up to 15 minutes of time to talk and to present their ideas and their maybe solutions to the current problems and issues. And after we have been gone through all of the four key speakers, then I will give the audience the possibility to get engaged and to get in touch with us or follow up on the chat so that we could propose all of these questions at hand. And then again, we will have to discuss whether today's model of education is up to date. You know, whether we need whether something needs to be done in order to make a huge impact or a change, whether what has become the aim and the role of education into creating these citizens, the future citizens of our societies and our countries. So on other, then as well, we could, look into the youth organizing and the student bodies and organizing as a platform to provide some of the key information in their personal and professional growth. Whether that should be a platform to lobby and to advocate for future references, and whether they could use it as a panel, to address their issues. So, Adrian, feel free, and the floor is yours. You will have for up until 15 minutes.
Thank you. Dear participants, dear organizers, thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you today and talk about a topic that I really like, and for sure I think you also like it, which is education. My name is Adrian Barbaros, and I represent an organization called OBESU, which is the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions. We are the representatives of school students at European level, and we represent the school students in relation with different European institutions, such as the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council of Europe. For sure, I would have loved to be today with you in North Macedonia and debate and think of a better solution for young people from the Southeastern Europe, but due to the current situation, this was not possible. I believe in the power that this conference has in multiplying, first of all, the learnings that you have here in your local communities, but also to come up with solutions that policymakers will put into practice. Our voice is important and our voice matters. Through this conference, we young people do have a voice. I'm a Eastern myself. I live in Cluj in Romania, and I think that this part of Europe is indeed rich in culture, tradition, and it has a lot of potential. And it's up to us as young people to design a better future of our region and for our countries. And for me, education should be the first step. I've been thinking about the topic that has been given to me by the organizers for almost 1 week. And I was also thinking about the best way to present my ideas. And I decided to try to give you some problems and offer you some solutions on how I think education could be improved. So, is education up to date? What is the aim of education? I will try to talk from 3 points of view. First of all would be the curriculum, then school as institution, and then non-formal education. I will mainly focus on secondary education, as this is more in the scope of my organization, as we mainly work with school students, so people and youngsters that are part of the secondary education. The first problem with the curriculum, what we've seen from our experience, is that the curriculum is not really related to the labor market, but as well to the competencies that we need in order to be active citizens in society. So what we've seen that is lacking at the moment is the fact that we do not have that much space for digital citizenship education. We don't have that much space for entrepreneurship. We do not have that much space for what we call them soft skills. So some skills that would really help us to be more actively engaged in society, to communicate better, to understand the others, to be those leaders that the world really needs. Especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've noticed that there is a high need for changing the education systems. I was very happy to see that 1 week ago when I was at the informal conference of the Minister of Education, they created a declaration, and one of the priorities is to rethink the educational systems. So to make sure that what we do in school and what we learn and what is being taught to us is really has a real link in real life. And that would mean that we are more prepared for the challenges of the 21st century. We are more resilient. We can upskill and reskill and think from another perspective. So that would mean that the education is preparing us for the future and not for the past. And we as students, we as the main actors of education should be at the core of this process. And therefore, I think that our engagement in creating a more resilient, a more inclusive, a more quality education is imperative at this point. Second, I would like to refer a bit about schools as institutions. And from my point of view, those institutions need to change as well and be more oriented to partnership. And in this case, the main partner of the school is, of course, the student. I remember that in middle school, when I used to study, there were two entrances, one for the students and one for the teachers, two separate stairs, one for teachers and one for students, not to mention that only teachers had some facilities such as water dispenser, or that the teachers' part of school was more cleaned, and for example, there was also some spaces where there was prohibited for students to be, and this was more, let's say, a space, a part of the building where only the teacher could walk. Well, this needs to change. We need to change this approach that teachers are sometimes seen as rivals, or that only teachers deserve respect, or that students' perspective doesn't matter. School as an institution should be the place where students feel like they belong and each student counts. On the other side, what we've noticed is that students all over Europe started to produce a change in their schools. We cannot wait for the Ministry of Education, for example, to make the change. We have to be the change. In this regard, school students started their own initiatives in their schools, and this can bring a change, can bring students and teachers together and remove some barriers. For example, my colleagues from all over Europe organize different debates, summer school workshops, and seminars in their very own school. This created the change, this created synergies, and this is what we need at the moment. So by the fact that, for example, a few years ago, this wasn't that popular among school students to really do something in their school, we can see that at this point, students as well are trying to change their school. They're trying to bring a meaningful impact, and by organizing different activities that bring together teachers, that bring together parents, bring together different public authorities, this can really raise the topic of education up. This can really have a grassroots impact. Thirdly, I would like to focus as well on non-formal education. I was very happy to see that non-formal education is on the agenda of this conference as well. Even the education systems do not help us to achieve our fullest potential. One way out is the non-formal education and engagement in youth organizations. It has been proved that non-formal education can complement what is lacking from the education systems and make us be more active in societies. School does not always prepare us for the real world, but non-formal education can. Therefore, there are many situations in which, for example, students participate in different exchanges, participate in different clubs, participate in different youth organizations, and this can really have an impact on their personal growth. By participating in different parts of non-formal education, students can gain more skills, can get more competences that somehow are complemented by those that are part of the formal education systems. I'm Adrian, and I think that the aim of education is to prepare us to be actively engaged in society, and should also enable us to think critically and make the best decisions. We can do this if we change our curriculum, if we invest in education, and we have the students at the heart of all of our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for your thoughts and insight on this current topic. And I would have to agree that we have had the same issues when it comes to student organizing, and now they have recognized their power and their will to contribute to society and to change the system. So we have the current issues here in North Macedonia as well. So we definitely need to change the curriculum and to improve them on a way that they will be more inclusive, that they will be up to date, that they will reflect the current needs of the labor market as well. And then when it comes to the schools as facilities, we have had the same issue here as well, and I presume that it is the same or the similar situation in the region. So students and the young people in general should be regarded as equals to the grown-ups, and in this environment to their professors. And so that is why that the institution, the schools as an institution per se, needs to be improved, and then the whole working and education environment should be safe, fun, and then everybody should be treated equal. And then I have to compliment, yes, on the non-formal education that has the role to play, and it is an addition to the formal education, because not at all times we have the formal education that meets all the needs of the future citizens. So that is why that the non-formal has to go hand in hand with the formal, and that is an excellent example. So I saw that some of you have never heard of Obesu, and Anelia, thank you for sharing the website so that you can get some more information there. And I will have to say that at one occasion we have had the opportunity to translate a very vital document of their own. And it deals with as a declaration to improve the rights and the obligations of the students and the student organizing. So you should definitely look that up as well. I highly recommend it. So let's move on to the second speaker. We have Mr. Oltean Rumbulaku. He is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Education, Sport and Youth in the Republic of Albania, and he's going to be introduced by Francesca Muca, and he is currently at the conference hub in Tirana, which is hosted by the Young Professional Network. So he has had some experience as a researcher and lecturer at the University of Tirana. So Mr. Rumbulaku, maybe you can share some thoughts on, or continue up, especially what Adrian suggested in his speech, and what is the key role in the institutions, especially the highest ones, whether that would be the Ministry of Education, for instance, when it comes to young people in the Republic of North Macedonia. Currently, we do not have a ministry of this kind, so our Agency of Youth and Sport is the top level when it comes to youth and sport policies. So how can the institutions come ahead with all the relevant stakeholders and introduce them in order to improve the current affairs in this matter? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, these last months, of course, gave us a very big challenge to overcome, especially in terms of the whole education system, although I did engage more in the higher education system, let's say, in trying to give more orientation to universities in order to pass the barrier or to pass their, let's say, closed mentality in order to be better prepared for their students and for their let's say, for the community. In fact, this situation helped us to understand many things. help us to understand that, of course, I can say the truth. There are many universities, even in Albania, that have, of course, some program studies that do very little teaching or very little educational process, and there are others who, let's say, try to be better in this area. What is future? What do we expect from the future? I don't let's say expect to be an easy task to say about it. But if we can think 10 years ahead, try to think everyone 10 years, let's say, ahead of us. Of course, I can give you only some figures. At least in Albania, there will be 40% less students than that in this moment. So there will be much less students, much more less students. Of course, we will have much more old professors or lecturers. So there will be very few students, but very, very old lecturers. Of course, this is not very good when we, let's say, when we see it from this moment. Of course, there will be blurred separation of, in my opinion, of these degrees. So we have now some bachelors, some masters, at least in our countries, which seems like the sole path to go ahead. But probably in the future, of course, even short cycles or even hybrid cycles or even, let's say, special studies will be much more frequent and, of course, especially in the areas that are more, let's say, requested, more demand from the labor market. I mean, ICT, for example. So having this in mind, we are in the moment of setting more rules, but probably in the future we should be in the let's say in the decision making or having less rules in the higher education because the market will set the other part of the market, the biggest companies, those who require the labor market. So from this I get to I think the most important topic of the future of the higher education, the links of the higher education to the labor market. At least here in Albania, we don't have studies on, let's say, graduate surveys or even professional surveys, which show where is the origin of the workers, where is the origin of the professionals, and this is problematic in order to find the best practices, the best cases, and of course to try to reduce the worst cases. We at least as the ministry, we are trying now to have more cooperations of universities with companies, with the biggest companies, the biggest companies of some sectors. For example, ICT sectors, let's say financial accounting sectors, engineering sectors. And if these companies, these sectors could influence the curricula, could influence the, let's say, the amount of knowledge that the students get, of course, it will be better for the companies, but it will be better for students. And so, let's say, as Adrian mentioned before, of course, the main thing to be done or the main thing to be improved in the future is let's say having more dynamic curricula. The curricula usually, at least here in Albania, probably even around, are very set on stone, very static. Sometimes they go for the 10 or 20 years without having any slight change. So of course it's hard with our universities which usually are like some ivory towers in which the professors are enclosed there and they do not want to communicate with the surroundings. So it is very hard. I experience it every day. It is very hard to, let's say, to knock at their walls and to let's say, push them out of the ivory tower and to meet the business community, to meet the sectors, and to bring them more to the reality. Of course, this is hard, but this should be done. We will try to put some, let's say, some pilots or some good cases in each universities of these corporations, which in the future can serve as, let's say, as a model to be replicated even in the other faculties and the other departments of each university. So the future is, of course, very uncertain. I mean, I can repeat again the same question: what can we expect after 10 years? After 10 years, we can expect probably some students that will go in some very specific academies that probably should be built by companies. For example, by big companies. Big companies need, for example, 200 ICTs in a year, and they can build their own academy, and that academy could be, let's say, without any fee, and they can get the students that they need. So the future will be much more, I think, much more dynamic. It will not have these rules, these, let's say, levels and everything that helps the exchanges, but doesn't have the real content of the university. Well, that is, let's say, part of my opinions in this area, but I would expect questions from more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rumbulaccu, for the shared thoughts and opinions. Now, shall we go with the other speakers?
Yes, we can continue with the other two panelists as well. And then at the end of the session, we'll have some time to pose questions, answers, and whether to share their own experiences. So thank you once again, Mr. Rumbulaccu, for summarizing some of the issues that North Macedonia faces as well. And I would like to give courage to all the other participants to share their experiences as well from their own points of view as well as from their countries, because a recent study, youth study from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in 2018 and 19 indicated that education is actually one of the pillars that causes the brain drain. You know, the quality of education shows that it has a direct correlation between the young people leaving the Western Balkans in general, or the Balkan Peninsula, because they are not quite satisfied with it. And we have these young, motivated people, and there is a huge percentage of high school students that continue to the higher education. So in our country, it is around 96% of all the high school students that continue their education at universities. So it has become a trend as well, but if it were the social sciences 10 years ago, currently maybe the information technology, it has a higher demand, but we'll see, especially with the pandemics and the whole need for digitalization of the process will come in hand. So we'll see what the future holds, because as you mentioned as well, we have the same fear of losing the young population or having an elder population in the region, because most of the young qualified students will go and live and then work abroad. So another key aspect of your speech is the internship and the combination and correlation within the private sector as well, because At one hand, we have the curriculum in the formal education, and there is this disbalance between the needs of the labor's market. So it is not always common to see that one just with their high school or university diploma could go and find a job very easily. So and even if they do, they most of the time they have only theoretical knowledge. So that is why the internship, it is a very, very good aspect of all this cooperation. But it has to be substantial, you know. It does not have to just be as a formal criteria, because some of the universities in the higher education in North Macedonia, it is mandatory, but then again, it has to be very of high quality. So that is why the business community should come at hand and then offer some of the solutions and complement the needs of the formal education, because it is quite vital to keep the skills of the young people enhanced and strengthened so that they could implement it and use them here in our own respective countries. I will move along on the second subtopic, which is the adaptation to the crisis. Did we lose a generation? As you are all pretty much aware, this year the humanity has been struck by this whole health crisis, you know, the pandemic caused by the COVID-19, and it has shown the flaws of our societies, whether the gaps between different sectors in the society have risen. So it is always a problem to address something when it is uncommon, when it is new. And I am very thankful for all the health authorities. They are doing their best work in order to fight with the situation. And then on the other hand, we, the young people, but all the citizens in general, have to contribute towards the improvement and getting back to normal. But then again, the education has been one of the sectors that has been deeply impacted by the COVID-19. So on the other hand, we have all said that the digital agenda of the Western Balkans in general and the Southeast European countries as well should be high there up on the level in the priorities in the next 5 to 10 years. But this whole pandemic has caused the whole process to be very sped up. So, and we have had some adjustments, we have had some modifications, but then again, on the other hand, we have had problems with the access to internet, access to laptops, access to education, and then on the other hand, we have the problem with the quality of education, whether being at home and conducting the education online or digitally, whether that could be at the same level with going to schools, you know, being physically present. I have one information from the World Bank that at the start of the peak of the pandemic, when it started back in March, as of March the 28th, 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused more than 1.6 billion children and young people in general to be out of school in 161 countries. So that is approximately 80% of the world's enrolled students. So we see what is the current situation and how has the pandemic progressed. But then again, what are going to be the key findings and the lessons learned that we have had the opportunity to go through the last months, and whether we could implement something in the future, you know, because the World Bank has pointed out as well that we are going to start losing generations of students. You know, there is the gap of social skills, of socializing, and then there is the gap of the access and quality of education. So I would like to ask the following two speakers to address some of these issues from their own personal or professional background and point of view. And the next speaker is Ms. Professor Alla Popei. She is a former inspector of extracurricular activity at the Iași County School Inspectorate. So she has also initiated a guide, so maybe she could tell something from her own point of view. How can we access and adapt to the new methodologies, to the new technology, regardless of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then again, whether we are going to be back to normal or continue with the work in this sphere in the next 2 or 3 years, as the experts say. So, Ms. Apopei, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much. Hello and good evening to everyone. Indeed, we are very pleased and very, very much delighted to say greetings from Iași, Romania, with the Eurodemos Hub, that it is here with Ms. Ana Apopei, the speaker, that will definitely be pleased to answer to all your questions and to share from her expertise as professional. And we are here with the young people, the main beneficiaries of the session of education that we dedicate all our efforts, expertise, and all our energy for the best results. Therefore, the future of education belongs to the work of the professional in the benefit and with the active involvement of young people, which is very, very important. And also the conditions and the technology offers us the support. We are very happy that in this very original, unique, and innovative format of the International Youth Conference Kruševo from this year to benefit and to explore this opportunity. And yes, in the further moment, we invite Ms. Ana Apopei to share from her expertise as professional on the topic of future of education.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for this event. Is here. Good. Congratulations for organizing this event. It's an important international event for our society, for European society, but for our young generation. Some information about me. I'm a Latin teacher for 26 years, so I believe that the sentences docendo discimus and non scholes et vitae discimus are still in use and useful. I also teach Romanian language 10 years in my high school, Vasile Alexandri, that is located in city center in the heart of Iași. This high school have 960 students, middle school and high school, and 63 teachers. Iași is the cultural capital of Moldova, one of the regions of Romania, located in a northeast part, one on the border with the Republic of Moldova. Here you can see my high school, and I asked me why am I here. The answer, I suppose, I don't know certainly, I suppose it's my passion for extracurricular project and activities with my students. I also was during 10 years school inspector, as you mentioned, at School Inspectorate of Iași, school inspector for extracurricular activities. I worked with the students, and I am glad to see in this evening and to meet the representative of OBESO, because I heard more about this organization from Council of Students in Iași and Council of Students in Romania. I work hard with them. Another reason, I suppose, is my openness to work with young people, to get to know them better, to help them discover and develop harmoniously, forming the necessary skill for the nowadays society and for the future, assuming the national and European values. Also, my experience in this field I initiated the High School Student Association, Vasile Alexandri High School, IELVA, and many generation of active and community involved students who are formed through the project in society. And of course, the old connection with Eurodemos, our host here, from that period, determined, I suppose, them to invite me at this conference. This is a picture with my students from Vasile Alexandri High School at the beginning of a school year. Crisis. What is crisis? I mentioned that I am a teacher for classical language, so crisis, chrysos, in ancient Greek means choice, means decision, final phase of a design. According to definition, the crisis is associated with the evolution of a society marked by great difficulties, economic, political, social, and other. It is a period of tension, disorder, trials, often decisive, that manifest themselves in society. So this is a critical moment representing also a change. 2020, this is a year of colossal changes from my point of view. This is a year what forced us to stop for 3 months during springtime and look within ourselves to ask questions about the world we live in. The year for resetting and re-evaluating our lives, values, and priorities. The year to act for the future through education reinventing the school. So I think this year is very important for our school and education. My decision for this time is to be closer to my students in the period where distance is required, to support them, to help them to succeed together, to have good school and extracurricular results, to pass the baccalaureate, because my student is in a high school, and to find their right way in life, to adapt their education to new learning systems by using specific methodology and technology, to overcome the challenge in order to keep the emotion to human and to social within us. So we have chosen to stay anchored in reality, even we spend more time in the virtual environment. Let's keep the right direction. This is my decision and the decision of my colleagues from Vasile Alexandri High School. This is one picture from our extracurricular activity because we combine formal education and extracurricular or outdoor education. So the question is, did we lose a generation? Specialists around the world are sounding the alarm that with the closure of school and the transition to online home learning, we will have disastrous consequences, the lost current generation of students. Causes: the education system is not prepared for online education. Lack of equipment, access of all the students to the internet, students' values and motivation to be responsible for their own learning. Challenge teachers for organizing online teachers' activities. Representatives of the World Health Organization call for school to remain open. We can't afford a lost generation due to the pandemic period. So schools must remain open to the end and be closed only as a last solution. This is a declaration from 5 November this week. To answer these questions, it's important to know the characteristic of a new millennium generation, A, Z, and Alpha generation. This is a digital generation what quickly adapted to the new devices and application. Their expectation for quick access to multimedia information is great. They are well informed and accustomed to technology. The children of the Alpha generation, this is generation what born in 2010 with the launch of the iPod. They have never known a day without technology. The name of this generation was chosen by the Australian sociologist Mark McCrindle. He chose the first letter of the Greek alphabet, alpha, to mark the transition to a completely new era. They are influencers from an early age. They already use the artificial intelligence from the market and to its full potential. So this generation, Alpha generation, is tech heavy, more than tech driven. Was information about nowadays generation of students. Here we have information how we as teachers are in online education, our needs, our rule. After 26 years of experience, I improve and discover the new roles in a classroom. So the teachers need to have the skills of an entrepreneur, to be a technical consultant, to be a coach, trainer, to play the role of a detective behind the curtain to find the student, to be a nurse, to be a psychologist, to write, to post, to create in the same time, to have a good coordination, to adapt, and to know the new generation and its learning needs. It's not simple. I applied a survey last week in my school in this topic, and this is the result. Is the pandemic generation a low generation? Our students from my high school think in this way. 74% say no. Behind home, everyone works in his own style. Learn to be more responsible, to take care of themselves, have the ability to develop cognitively, perhaps more than offer the school. Have adapted to the situation, to the obstacles, and information is accessible totally nowadays. From this point of view, online learning is more appropriate for them. The future belongs to technology, and we must, our students say, get used to this way of learning. We are the first generation exposed to so many new things that are useful in our life. The learning methods and platforms used during the period of online education are interesting and offer better training to students. And of course, for them, it's a greater comfort and safety to stay in online learning. 17% say yes, because exam preparation is poorer, teachers are not sufficiently prepared for this form of learning, students are inadaptive and stay with closed cameras. The teacher cannot pay attention to all students in online education. The impact of school is much lower online. And electricity, lack of electricity, internet, poor quality equipment are the factors that make learning difficulties for disadvantaged students. And of course, the student-teacher relation suffers. 10% don't know what is better. The teacher's point of view, 17% definitely say no. Online learning is a challenge to remind ourselves and to develop new skills, abilities. We continue to learn right from the beginning of the pandemic, so we don't fall being with our subjects. More students and teachers are responsible. Those students are part of the digital generation, so online learning is not a problem. There are many new resources that satisfy their curiosity to know more, to learn, and to hook them. They are very adaptable, they like the online, and they are stronger than we think. 30% say, I don't know. The results will be seen in time. The long interaction with the devices is a major problem. The interactivity has totally shifted to the virtual environment. What is the possible solution? What are the possible solutions? I prefer blended learning, combining traditional learning with e-learning. It's more effective than e-learning or classical learning. But for this difficult period, online education, it's important this form of learning to be well-organized program with a limited time spent online, especially for young students. To be clear and assumed rules by the Ministry of Education, teachers, students, parents for conducting online learning, teaching and assessment activities. Very important is permanent communication of teachers with students and their parents regarding the way of involvement and the results of the test, the learning difficulties. Teachers training courses is important part for use of online learning resources, acquire the new methodology. Accessing project with the European funds for equipping classrooms, students and teachers with devices for online learning. Creating online learning resources in each school, virtual school library and e-learning school platform in multimedia format with a lesson of the best teacher in a region or in a country for each subject. And I initiate a project from our school. We create a journal of the Romanian teachers in the pandemic time. This project help to support and encourage teachers in Romania and the Republic of Moldova to share experience and motivation to succeed. So the conclusion is that we human build the tools first, then they build us. For this time, for this nowadays education, adaptation, communication, and training are essential milestones on the road to the future of education.
This was the input from the hub dedicated to the future of education from Iași, Romania. Thank you, Ms. Ana Pope, for the very interesting information that you have shared. And also, please receive our greetings also from the young people that we have here with us. Therefore, we see that the role of education becomes more and more important for managing transitions and doing so in a balanced way to avoid new inequalities. But we are talking about phenomena that occur on a global scale. Therefore, actions and regulations at local, national can be insufficient or inefficient. Therefore, we need the joint effort and the joint action. The Institute for the Future calls the next decade as the age of distributed power. And the future is emerging right now. Therefore, active attitudes are needed. Anticipating the effects of digitization, creating mechanisms of responses, promoting trust and social dialogues, movements that already occur in the education. We talk about formal, about non-formal education, and we see more and more important the role of informal education. We are all together in a big family dedicated to education, and this topic has never been more appropriate for the international conference dedicated to youth, because it is regarding to all of us and our training and education. From Iași now, we are, if we can say we have a short review with the participants at the hub. Therefore, we see as the future of education as new opportunities and new dividing lines. But in this moment, in this real moment, we see that the benefits of education, the digital technology brought together participants from all the European countries and more participants from the local level, here from Iași, which wouldn't have been possible if the new revolution, the digital era, wouldn't have brought this need. Therefore, our thinking from the needs to transform them into solutions, it is the approach that we want to see, that we want to apply, and we want to put in practice. And this happens now during the International Youth Conference, Kruševo. Therefore, from this, we pass the word from Iași to our moderator from North Macedonia.
Thank you very much, Maya, for your elaborate discussion. And I would like to give my thank you and compliments to the conference hubs, both in Albania and Romania, for organizing the conference, as well as for providing the technical support and assistance. You know, it is not always easy. As you may see, there are sometimes some technical difficulties. So imagine how would this transfer to a whole national level when it comes to the education sector as well. And a huge thank you to Professor Apopei for her thoughts and the presentation about whether what are the key aspects and issues that are currently facing on, whether this generation is lost or is there any hope in order to save them, academically speaking. So her main points were that we need to adapt to the situation, which is completely true, and I have to agree that not everything is so certain and that we would have to adapt in the future situations as well. So There is this huge combined model going offline and online that we here in our country as well have proposed in order to, when there are maybe lower cases of COVID-19, some of the schools should be opened for the physical attendance of the students and the teachers. And when there are these huge numbers in some of the municipalities, the whole education system should be transferred online. So one may say that that is a pessimistic view, because we have seen that not all is lost when it comes to the loss of the generation. So maybe some of the teachers have had some difficulties when it comes to dealing with the new situation and the new model of education. And I would like to refer to some of the comments that were made within the groups. And I've seen that you have taken the liberty to write a lot in the chat, so maybe it is more convenient for you rather than to talk over the microphone, so feel free to do that. But then again, we have seen that not everything can be done online. You know, there is the huge difference when it comes to vocational training or doing some experiments that not at all times could be done from our own homes. So that is a huge problem. You know, the combined method and model should be adapted accordingly, because to be honest, maybe we are not at the same level as one more advanced society such as Singapore, Finland, or Estonia, who have had the best results when it comes to the digitalization. But then again, it is what it is. We are stuck in this situation, and probably in the next 2 or 3 years, everything has to be revised when it comes to the digital agenda, especially in the education sector. But you know, that crucial aspect is that we have seen these same problems, same issues in Poland, in Bulgaria, in Greece, Kosovo as well. So I know that we are in the similar situation, but all of us must work together. Another point that was made here is that when it comes, especially maybe to the elder professors, to the more senior professors, they are more used to doing things physically, you know, being in the classroom, discussing directly with the students and pointing out at the blackboard. So they definitely need to have their skills advanced by a national platform, by a national curriculum, and then so that they could implement the whole education online accordingly and in a qualitative manner. So the younger people, the younger generation, such as the alpha generation, are more tech savvy. And, you know, even from 2 or 3 year olds, they are always getting used to talking through the mobile phone or through the laptops, or, you know, going online. So it is more natural to them. But then we would have to address the needs of the teaching staff and the whole administration in order to address these issues accordingly. And last but not least, we have the fourth speaker, that is Mr. Hristo Pančugov. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at the New Bulgarian University and is an executive director of the Democratic Institute Foundation. So, Mr. Pančugov, what are your thoughts and reflections on these current affairs? How is your own perspective from your professional background, or how is maybe currently Bulgaria facing the same challenges? What would be your recommendations into following up to this situation and providing the best solutions? You have your
Yes. Hello to everyone, and thank you to the organizers for having me as part of this panel. I think this discussion is extremely relevant with regards to the challenges that we are facing. I will try to be brief, which is not very useful. No, it's not very likely for an academic professor. But simply establish a framework for a discussion, probably. A couple of things came up already into this discussion, so I will start with them. The first one being that, okay, I am representing the first private university in Bulgaria, which was established right after the fall of the communist regime in the beginning of the 90s. New Bulgarian University has had its electronic platform for virtual education and especially for asynchronic sort of education. You know, all the available resources are in the platform. The curricula is in the platform. So basically, what happens in class is simply, you know, a discussion on things that students already have access to. However, this platform was never used for a synchronic sort of digital or distance learning, let's say. Most of the professors, even the young ones, didn't really think in terms of using more interactive or the platform for occasions in which they're not present in university, which is, I think, commonly spread, especially when it comes to Western European higher education. The situation, I guess, is even worse, which is a point to which is pointing to one of the few major problems that I see, especially within the region. We have thought about education not only higher, but in high school and preliminary and basic schools as well, pretty formally. We are used to discuss curricula. We are used to discuss relationship between the curricula and the real sector, so to say, and the business, the requirements of the business environment in general. And mostly we are used to think about who do we educate in terms of their professional skills. So what profession will they get, or how prepared will they be to face the market, essentially, as we think of it. Globalization has changed that a lot. I don't think that there is actually a single profession that we can swear will look exactly the same way 5 years from now. And I think this requires a major shift of paradigm, a shift which is directed more towards a discussion that our societies never had, at least in Bulgaria. We have discussed changes to the education system. We have discussed reforming educational system on all levels, but we never answered the question, how does a successful graduate of this educational system look in this day and age, but more importantly, in the next decades? So what are the set of skills and knowledge he needs to have in order to succeed in managing his own life, not being a professional, but being able to adapt to the rapid changes of current globalization. And this has been a major setback in terms of reform and in terms of how we think education, at least in this region, although I don't know in details most of the systems here. I guess I strongly guess that this will be the case universally. The coronavirus crisis and the isolation introduced a major opportunity in that direction. The highly regulated environment, especially into the field of high schools and basic schools, was facing a major challenge. So basically in Bulgaria, the school system had to be closed and the education system had to be closed overnight. It took a couple of days to simply make the decision of closing the schools, which placed all the pressure on schools themselves. So the ministry had no idea what to do. And they allowed the autonomy of schools and teachers in particular to decide how to pick up. There was no general regulation on what platform to use. There was no general regulation on what methods teachers were required to use. There were no control on the ministry over this process initially, which allowed for some very creative and very innovative approach. So basically this autonomy, the lack of this formal framework, and the need for the teachers and the schools to basically set up a new plan, which will allow for the successful completion of the year, gave a major impetus into innovation of Bulgarian system. Introduced the flexibility this system never really faced up to this point. So I will go briefly through some positives I see. I will go briefly through some negatives as well. Um, Now, obviously, this gave a major impetus for rethinking the autonomy of school system in general, the real meaning behind the autonomy of the school system. This gave us the opportunity to focus more on the educational process itself, with the required skills and the required knowledge that that children will have to get at the end, instead of on the curricula in particular. Knowledge is everywhere these days. You can find it universally online. Most of these students have access universally to knowledge. The real question is what to do with that knowledge. And simply putting the overall burden of the discussion on the substance, on what is to be thought and what not, maybe is the wrong approach to how we think about education these days. So the first major positive I see is that flexibility, or at least raising the discussion on how we approach education in this day and age. And what I mean by that is not simply deciding to go digital. There are many reasons why this will not be a solution, but at least start thinking in terms of alternative approaches to the organization of educational process might be a good stepping stone on future educational reform. The second positive that I saw, at least in Bulgaria, is the fact that by staying home and by being part of a digital educational process, teachers and students both manage to engage parents into this process. For the last couple of years, at least in Bulgaria, I guess universally, you have this distance, disengagement of family and parents from the educational process, or too much involvement, the so-called helicopter parents. I think that currently, by becoming part of the whole process themselves, for obvious reasons, you're staying home with your children, and if the teacher is good, which mostly was the case, I hope, parents really got to know what children are doing in high school. They got to see what is useful and what not, and thus they might be a good ally into a future discussion on educational reform. One of the things that made this transition relatively easier was the fact that it didn't happen overnight in terms of people simply getting into digital education, but the fact that teachers already knew the students from their life interaction with them. So the moment they had to transfer online and distant learning, they already had an idea what to expect from different students, which gave them opportunity to address individual weaknesses or foster individual strengths. This ultimately meant that shyer kids, kids that were outsiders in other sort of social situations and life, were now more engaged, could be and could become more engaged into the process itself. This also, the digital or the distance learning, gave the possibility of a more personalized feedback, but more importantly, more continuous feedback, one which was constant throughout this process, which in class isn't really and always possible in the first place. And the final positive that I see was that finally a real meaning to existing networks, professional networks of teachers managed to be utilized. Whether by provision of methodological instruments, whether by provision of resources, finally these networks started working in Bulgaria. Up to this point, they were simply a forum for exchange of opinions, and that's it. Now they were becoming gradually moving towards becoming supportive networks, which I think is important. Now, the negative sides of all this. Distant learning is not the same as an absent learning. It's not the same as, a repetition of the class activity, but online. This posed some major challenges to teachers, to students, to schools in general. Challenges that had to do with how you structure the process of teaching. How do you structure a process of evaluation so that it's meaningful and it's not, simply covering ground and skipping over lessons. It's also about methods. It's also about how do you engage students actively and meaningfully into the entire educational process itself, which was not necessarily as successful as we would like. Even with higher education, even with New Bulgarian University, who was prepared to jump online overnight. Essentially, simply continuing with the same practices and same sort of assignments, but in an online environment, didn't really do a lot for keeping motivation high, didn't really do a lot from achieving educational goals, and etc. etc. The second negative that I see is related obviously to the lack of social contact. If that situation is prolonged too long, too much, the required social skills and their repetition in the school environment might significantly impact the development of children themselves, which might in turn lead to possible loss of social skills in the long term. Moreover, it introduced a growing gap between those that were very well versed into digital technology and had access to them, and those that did not, which is a matter of social strata, of demographics, as was already pointed out, and so on. So the exclusion of groups of children that were members of vulnerable groups or otherwise is a significant problem that we should be wary of and address meanwhile. Then a growing gap you could see between children of the same age and same educational level. The second negative is that you start spending too much time in front of computer if you want to have achieved all educational goal and cover the program. And finally, the very environment and home, the fact that everyone is closed together is not the best environment in terms of conflicts, in terms of how you achieve the educational goals. I have divided some major challenges in terms of access and quality of education, etc., but I don't think we will have the time. So I will simply jump into what do I think is the future, or at least what can we do about it. As I said, this is a stepping stone. Digital education or a distant learning, at least, might be a very useful and successful tool into achieving more from the educational system that we currently get, but also into engaging students that will not otherwise be so engaged into environment, especially in terms of vulnerable groups, and especially in terms of children with different sorts of disabilities that will prevent them from active participation in class. Technologies might be significantly useful. So a general strategy, a general thinking about combination of present and distant learning might be the way to go from here on. But this again needs to be stepping on the overall discussion of what do we need to see in a graduate so that he's successfully managing his life in this day and age, and not only on content, curricula, which always takes precedence into discussions over here, the Balkans, at least. Secondly, the real focus on the discussion from here on, I think, should be on strategies which will develop education and personal learning skills that will help students understand the educational process better and be able to self-organize better, be able to reflect on what they're doing and how, because engagement, their own engagement into this process is where we can gain ground here with distant learning. The synchronical education, which is more or less a repetition of the classroom but online, whether through interactive methods, whether through different resources that you might use to utilize this relationship online. However, it's still some sort of repetition of direct communication. However, much more with distant learning might be achieved if you create the required skills into the students to be actively engaged into this process. So a methodological program that will develop such skills needs to be set in place, I think, from here on. The third part, I think it's very important here, is to further build and develop these professional support networks. Just some statistics. Recently, we had a survey which evaluated the effect of distant learning in Bulgaria for the months that it lasted in the beginning of this year. It seemed that, 45% of the teachers have been engaged in some sort of education with interactive methods and informational technological methods in teaching. However, only 25% of these teachers were actually passing through educations of actual distant learning. So some have taken education on multimedia, let's say, but only 25 were actually engaged into meaningful process, rethinking how distant learning should be exercised. And 26% has actually gone through an education on restructuring educational process. 16% of all the teachers in Bulgaria have undergone no education with regards to this matter whatsoever. So this needs to change. Only 6% of all teachers have actually been engaged into creating resources. Although they have used much more these professional support networks, they were using them by simply copying something that other teachers have done or using ready resources already. But they are not actively engaged into creating new forms of resources in this situation, which I think is the way to go from here on as well. Then a major methodological framework, a list of resources which are available nationally, but a coordinated effort by the ministries in respective countries, by the professional communities in respective countries, into creating the bunch, the bundle of resources, approaches, addressing issues, raising questions, raising discussions, needs to take place. The year has passed. The ministry has based its entire strategy on the idea that we are getting back in class, which is obviously not a viable strategy facing the new wave of coronavirus crisis as we see it today. So a major effort into coordination of developing a new framework that teachers could use universally, more or less, or at least base their educational process on, needs to be developed. And finally, I could not stress that enough. I think that the focus ultimately needs to fall on the process, needs to fall on how we teach and what skills we would like to develop through this educational process. and on the flexibility of that process, which doesn't have to do with grading. It doesn't have to do with final evaluation of knowledge. It has to do with actually preparing the kids to survive into modern times. So the focus on the process, not that much on the content. This is, I think, at least what the coronavirus isolation and the fact that we were forced into distant learning without even having a choice about it provided a major opportunity to start on thinking and discussing ultimately. This is what I've prepared mostly. Again, as a departure point for a discussion, I'll be happy to engage and interact further on these issues.
So thank you very much, Dr. Panchugov, for your elaborate presentation. So we saw that some major shifts in the paradigms should be made. So this has taken out of the context of all the expectations at the moment that we had. And so we need to adapt to the new reality or to the new normal. And you stressed out what is a successful graduate, you know, and I couldn't agree more. You know, the whole process and the whole purpose of the education is to create a successful individual at the end of the day, to be an active citizen, to contribute to the society. So not necessarily just to find a good job or to have good grades, you know, the whole process needs to make us a better person at the end of the day. And you had some very good points about bringing out the positive and the negative sides and how can we adjust to them and address them, because it is very important that we have seen some of the parents being more engaged. I really liked the term you used about the helicopter parents. It has helped a lot of the parents to get more engaged and to provide additional support to their children, because to be quite frank, in the past, that has not been the situation in some of the families in North Macedonia, but I presume it is pretty similar across the region as well. But then again, we have the negative sides, which is the social aspect, the socialization between the young people. And you know, when we work with young people in our youth clubs as part of the non-formal education, we have seen that that is one of the biggest problems, you know, that they do not meet in person, they could not interact, and the schools they were some of the places where they could just hang out and share experiences and talk to each other. But now that is a bit taken away from them, and depending on the state measures in the respective countries, some of them are allowed to go outside and hang out, and some of them are not. So, and when it comes to the health risks and benefits, some have created clusters as well. So it is quite on the contrary, you know, it is very mixed up. But some of the negative sides as well is that how are the young people, the students with disabilities, going to adapt to this new normal, to this new system of functioning? We have had some serious issues in addressing the people that have hearing or vision impairments, and you know, that they require educational assistance. So that is a huge problem that we have to take into account, and that is why you proposed the professional support networks, which could play a key role between the different stakeholders, between the parents, the teachers, the academic staff in general, but then again the students as well, so that we could all help each other in these dire times of need. So at this point, I would like to thank all of the 4 key speakers for their presentations, for their thoughts, for their contribution to the whole discussion. And I would like to open the floor for all present, whether you would have some comments to share, some perspectives of your own, whether you would like to catch up on what was said previously. So feel free to join in, whether that would be orally by using the microphone, or then again, I could go back to some of the key points that were made during the chat. I suppose that you were very more relaxed when it comes to writing down your opinions, because you have made some very good points, and the discussion in the chat is very good. So if there's anyone who would like to raise a hand, let me see from some of the participants. Yes, so first of all, there are 2 participants that have raised 3 hands, so I will give the floor to those participants. It would be very useful if you could just present yourself and then address if you have a question towards some of the key speakers, or not, if you would like to make a comment, just state it, and then the speakers will have the opportunity to reflect on that and provide an answer back to you. So first we have Dimitar, then we have Eva Završnik, and then the third one is Anis Benabet. So feel free to comment or to post the question online. So let's see, and then direct it to some of the speakers.
Yes, hello, thank you. I am Dimitar, I am a student from Macedonia, and I have a question and maybe joined with a comment. And this might not be a core question, it's more of a technical nature, but because I've noticed that lately we've been blaming the educational system more and more for various reasons, and it is reasonable. And on the other hand, I noticed that students started to analyze and criticize the Bologna system regarding the universities. So my question is, do you think that it's time to think about modifying the Bologna system? And can that be a solution through which we can solve the other core problems? Thank you.
Okay, so Dimitar, do you have someone in particular to address this question to, or anyone who feels free could provide a comment?
Yes, to anyone who feels free.
Okay. So is there anyone interested? Yes. Okay, we're going to Tirana. Yeah, okay.
If I may say something, the Bologna process is mostly an exchange office, in the meaning that the system could, let's say, transit or transport students from one another. While the real problems or the future course is within the systems itself. Each country, each higher education system should try to, let's say, be more dynamic in order to fulfill the needs of its country or its economy of its youth.
Dimitar, if we can continue, because we have a question from Tirana House. Sorry.
Just a small comment on the Bologna system first.
Yeah, Dr. Panchugov raised his hand.
I would take leadership where I can find it. Obviously this exchange of students is extremely important for getting a taste of how different systems work and creating networks. I would not base it on Bologna process, but if the European Union manages, to define the direction universally on how education should look like, or at least raise the discussion on that issue, it will have somehow to be, cascaded down to at least the members of the European Union that are members of the region. I think that might be a good starting point of a discussion as well, but I would not bet that this will change the systems in general.
Okay, thank you very much. So there are 2 raised hands from the participants in the conversation as well, but I was informed that we have questions from the hubs from Romania and Tirana as well. So after I will give the floor to the participants to ask their questions, I will go over to Eurodemos and then to Young Professionals Network. So be prepared when I announce them. So at the time we have Eva Završnik, so if she could post her question or comment and address to some of the speakers.
Yes, hello. I didn't really prepare any questions. I just have a couple of comments. I studied social education, so this topic is very close to me. The first thing is, in regards to the first presentation, is that I do agree that universities should be adjusting to the market to some degree, because as I see in Slovenia, there is kind of no need for 100 law students to graduate every year. There are simply no jobs available for them. But at the same time, like speech therapists or family doctors are really needed. And when there's a job, there is not enough of them. So I think there should be some sort of adjustments in that. The second thing I wanted to comment on is about the curriculum, especially in primary schools. I think it's too dense and it's too extensive, and teachers are just pressured to go through it, and there's no space for open discussions or to open the topics like civic education or global issues or living in multicultural society. And most of the time, these issues are kind of pushed in the extra curricular activities, which is limiting, and only the ones that are the most motivated and interested in that are going to these activities. And then the last thing about the question if we lost a generation, I think in Slovenia, when we closed the schools, we forgot about the kids with special needs or the ones that don't have the motivation or the focus to be present in this online form of schooling. And we have also forgot about the kids that live in families where there are 5 children, that this we also discussed in the Zoom chat. And there are 5 kids, there's 1 computer or no computers at all, and lack of space to actually really participate in learning. And the last thing I would like to emphasize is that in Slovenia, every year we're doing this sort of tests, and we're monitoring the physical and motor development of the kids. And they get some sort of sports education card. And the last one was kind of pointed out after the end of the first lockdown, and we saw the largest decline in physical activity of the children, and the largest increase in the proportion of children with obesity in the history of monitoring that is been going on for many, many years. So I don't think that we have lost a generation, but we're losing it because we really need to admit that physical school is very, very important. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for joining in. And you've raised some serious good points and questions, because that is one of the social groups that has been neglected in this whole period as well. So I think that apart from they have had some difficulties even in the normal situations prior to the COVID-19, but then again, now after the pandemic has started, they are facing even more challenges. Okay, so if anyone from the panelists would like to comment, yeah, raise the hand. Okay. Mute. We cannot hear you.
I pressed the
Yes.
button, but it
Yes.
doesn't work. Okay, sorry. I have a very strong opinion about the market, so I would like to share it with you. Just a provocation here. Of course, it is important to have a link between the universities and the market, but it is important only in areas that are about professions, really. And I've observed a tendency about higher education to base the entire universities on this link and only on professional education. And modern world is about search of meaning. If we put too much pressure and too much focus on how the future student can get their money, and don't place enough effort into developing those humanitarian, at least subjects, to the extent to which universities actually produce meaning as well, we are in deep trouble.
Yes. Okay, going on to the next question. Raised hand from Anis Benabed.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the floor. Thank you for the nice presentations and to the audience for being here. Well, I am Anis. I'm a PhD student in economics and international affairs, living in France and Romania. I'm a petroleum engineer. I have been a researcher for, we may say, many years, since the beginning of my university. And we may say that I am partly against online learning, because I see that, as most of the speakers addressed so many points that are really available in some of my presentations. I would like just to have or to give brief comments and just a question to all the speakers and see whether, I don't know, they agree or they disagree with my point of view. Well, online education has become now a part of our social life and our usual life, and not everyone can adapt to this situation, especially in third countries or in countries where there is a lack of understanding this type of culture. So nowadays, for example, we have technical issues, we have distraction and time management, the lack of staying motivated, the adapting to unfamiliar technologies, the quality of courses, and of course, one of the bases here is creativity. Not all teachers or tutors can provide so creative methods to learners or just to education. The thing is that I'm thinking about is regarding the awareness, because we see that online education or homeschooling, as we can call in different ways, started many years ago in the UK and some developed countries like Australia and the US, just for those families that cannot pay for education. Why I'm trying to address this point? Because I think that after COVID or after some time, some schools or maybe some business schools will try just to threat learners just to provide maybe online education to be maybe less expensive than normal education, where people cannot have that type of quality education or something like that. The other point that I would like briefly to address is regarding the results of education, as Ms. Alla Apope covered some points regarding that. Not all stages of students or learners can adapt to online learning, because online learning, as I see, is very dangerous for kids, especially kids have to touch at least the tables, the desks, have to talk, have to go to maybe to have breaks, to meet their parents after the classes, etc. Because I've been teaching foreign languages for several years and I speak approximately 9 or 10 languages, and I understand well the mentality of people from different countries. Well, I hope that some of the speakers can just tell me whether they agree or not, if they see that during this pandemic period, people are exaggerating a lot regarding COVID politically, just to maybe introduce this digital system as something very important for the upcoming years. Because I see that not every clever citizen or just researcher, student or learner can agree just to sit at the table in front of an electronic device or just a computer, all days, years or months or maybe few hours, because it's harmful for the eyes, it's harmful for the skin, it's harmful for the brain, And I see that the results of online education, I can give 20% of the results of online education, and I can give 100% or 80% to offline education. We can have online education as an alternative, but not as a base. That's why this point has to be addressed now to prevent its problems. So after COVID or before, or during the upcoming years. Well, as this session is very, very nice, and I like really the 4 presentations. Yeah, thank you so much for covering so many points. Just I would like to add some or one point that I don't like during online education is just the problem is not just teachers. Students also can be combined in this opportunity, because by respecting everyone, I see that while some presenters are speaking, there are some maybe members here or participants having maybe questions or something in the chat, and that might be bothering to the others. So people that are in the audience. So this is one of the points that students and learners say, that while we are having a class online, there are students that are chatting or that are maybe talking on other topics. So the teacher cannot feel whether students understand or not, whether students are in the class or not, and many points that I think that all of my friends or our friends that are here in the audience can just share and just understand. Thank you so much, and I hope that they could add some comments that would be useful for everyone.
Thank you, Anis, for your provided feedback and for the questions. So, yes. Okay. So, Barbaros, you raised the hand to answer, provide feedback. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. I think you made some very nice points, and I totally agree with you that the e-learning system, the system that we have right now, will never replace the physical lessons. I'm a student as well. I think it's very difficult now to really adapt to these circumstances and really be as active as I was during the physical classes. At the same time, I also believe that in a way or another, this might be the new normal. There might be some systems, there might be some universities that there might be some schools that might try afterwards to have some online lessons and online classes all the time. So this might transform into the new normal, but I think it might depend from one system of education to another. At the same time, I also believe that this is an alternative education system. This should not replace the physical classes. This should not replace the human interaction. This should not replace the conversation between teachers and students. And when it comes to the side of control and having a very fair discussion here, I think when it comes to this side, because you mentioned control, from my perspective, I see that this control side is more that the teacher steers the whole lesson. So it is necessary to be that are in place some measures to have control, for example, to have the cameras on, to have some rules that are very clear so that everyone could really understand that this is education, this is formal education. So we need really to adapt to the circumstances and continue our education trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So I saw Maya raising a hand. Does the Professor Apopei have something to say, or would you like to pose some questions? Okay, and then Mr. Panchugov.
It's yes for both your questions. We also want to provide a comment on the previous question, and also to come with a question from our participants.
As I mentioned in my presentation, I don't agree to put all education in the online system. This generation is not a happy generation. All my colleagues and parents, and I see every day in the face of my students this thing. So to get all the curricula and put in online system, it's not a solution. I just mentioned, but this new generation, this is a different generation, and they like to discover a new learning by platforms. So we must to create this platform, and we teacher from my school every day or once in a 2 day we share our experience. We stay at night and discuss about methodology, about strategy to teach. So I give you an example. The exercises from the book I put in a Padlet. This is a new platform we discover, and my students they learn better from this experience, and they are engaged, more engaged, and with pleasure. Another examples, the content from the books we put in a word wall. So they like to play and to learn. So we need creativity. We need to exchange experience and courses for teaching, but not only online. I'm not agree with this. It's not my point of view. And to close the schools. General decision, our ministry take this decision yesterday. So from next week, during 1 month, we stay at home. We learn only in online. It's not a solution because we have community that they don't have any cases with the coronavirus infected people. So I suppose it's better for this school to stay open.
Thank you very much for your input. And yes, indeed, we followed during this session also the chat conversations of the international participants and the young people that we have here in the room. We're also pleased to see the interest and the ideas that were posted there on the chat. And if, as long as we have also here the focus, I'd like to pass the word now to one of the young participants at the conference, Roxana Irod.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Roxana Irod. I'm here on behalf of the Eurodemos and all my colleagues in the room. My question and comments are related to did we lose a generation topic. I represent that minority in the survey that feel like we are disadvantaged, we are losing something by having online school. Some of the problems were already mentioned, like lack of motivation, the problem with feeling like we are actually studying and learning in the home environment that's completely different from the school environment. But another problem that should be addressed and mentioned is that a lot of families, at least in Romania, are intergenerational. So that means that they live with their parents, their grandparents, different family members. So it's really hard for them to do online learning because some of them don't even have their own room. So if you live in the room with your parents or grandparents, they can interrupt you. They are a distraction. And also in the rural area, we have really big problems with technology, like lack of access to internet, to devices. So that part of the population that is significant enough to not call it a minority that much does have this issue. Even people in the cities have these kind of issues. So they should not be treated as a minority that could or should be ignored. So how can we address this problem?
This being said, we have the word from Iași, Romania.
Thank you for that question. Would someone like to address this question about the issues with the minorities they're having currently with the pandemic? Or would
I could try and relate it to the previous comment.
Okay.
I couldn't agree more with what's been said already, but would like to stress the fact that distant learning is not only online learning. And there are two things that are important here, I think. Number one, that it is an instrument. It depends what we want to do with it. So it has its functions. It has things that we can achieve through distant learning, and it has things that cannot be achieved through distant learning. So the real challenge here is to try and link, this instrument to our overall educational system and make the most of it. A big part of distant learning is the ability to set up such tasks that are educational in themselves, that will not necessarily require a device, or at least or an overall access to online resource. Secondly, a big part of distant learning is working individually with students, discovering their individual education, but most importantly, keeping this continuous link between teacher and children. If it is done extremely well, it might achieve mostly what presence in class can do as well. So we should break the framework currently, especially with regards vulnerable and vulnerable groups, ethnical minorities, poor strata in societies. We should not think about distant learning only with the perspective of providing devices and getting access to the system, which is a problem. I completely agree. But by starting to think about a general approach to this topic and redesigning methods and the way we do it, it might actually mitigate the negative effects that we are currently seeing. And here, let me again point out to the fact that we are forced into this situation. No one is. We are not currently discussing whether we should substitute present education with digital form of education or distant learning. What I think we could try is reform the present education based on the lessons that we learned from the distant education, but also think of how, when we are forced into this situation, we can make the most of it, how we can overcome the challenges that we are seeing. This is not an argument in favor of distant learning. This is simply saying, okay, this is the situation and this is the instrument. What we can do to remedy the situation through that instrument. This is ultimately what's important, I think, currently.
Yes, definitely. So let's go over to the conference hub in Tirana. I think Francesca raised her hand, or is there anyone from the participants who would like to ask a question? If not, I mean, I have, yes, okay. So because I have also received in the chat, so after that I will ask Mr. Rumbulacu personally, because there is one addressed to him as well.
From one of the participants of our hub. Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Antonetta. I have a question for Professor Hristo Pančugov, if I pronounce it right. Can you suggest a concrete model of the future student, which skills he or she needs to have in order to thrive and not just survive or be adapted to the system? That's my question.
I might try. I fear it won't be extensive, of course. I think what will be important from here on is to bring back imagination into things we would like to see with our students. The current formal educational systems are so heavily based on substance and on getting knowledge into the heads of students that they're forgetting the importance of creativity and imagination. A good starting point, if you're interested in this topic, are all the books by Sir Ken Robinson. If you haven't come across any of his writings, they're extremely good, and they're all related to how we integrate creativity into educational system. I think this is one of the keystones from solving future problems. And for good or worse, imagination is developed through reading. Being engaged into higher education lately has put me into a number of discussions on whether we should make students read. Since knowledge is everywhere, they can access easily all the information they need. Why should they read? If you don't have the terminology to explain what's going on in the world. If you don't develop your imagination. And I think the real focus on the basic level of schools should be on reading, not on knowledge, but on making children appreciate reading as part of their everyday life. So my answer: imagination, creativity, also creative interactions with others and engagement with others as a big part of how we should address the society as it exists today, and ultimately self-reflection and ability to manage time and organize yourself. I think this should be the focus of the future educational process, inevitably. Of course, this is not all. Of course, we should be engaged into knowledge, we should be engaged in other stuff, but the design needs to place these at the heart of the system and then build upon it.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very glad that these whole fruitful discussions have emerged, and unfortunately we're coming to the end of the session, and I would like to give room for 2 more questions by some of the participants that had not had the opportunity to come in. So this will be the final 2 questions. Then maybe we'll provide some final remarks from the participants, from the speakers, and then I'll wrap it up. So we have a question from Angie Halvatori, which is directed to Mr. Rumbulacu. What are some of the current or soon-to-be implemented policies in order to improve the quality of state or public universities? Because we cannot certainly give it in to the set circumstances. So how can we improve, the quality of the state or public universities? What is your opinion, Mr. Rumbulacu?
This is a very hard question. In fact, we in Albania are working for the strategy on education, which includes higher education. And some of the main, let's say, pillars are related with, let's say, those aspects that I mentioned before. So engaging more on curricular development, not just as part of Bologna process, but in a more dynamic way. Of course, being more related to the labor market or to the, let's say, bigger sectors in order to have some skills that can generate foreign investments and can bring here in Albania big companies that can employ much more employees. And of course, other elements that do increase the chances or the possibilities of the universities to behave better or to have better relations with international stakeholders with EU projects, Horizon projects, Erasmus projects, and the whole other programs that EU has. So the internationalization of our universities. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question, which is not targeted specifically to any of the speakers, comes from Dora Varjacic. Should young people, as well as the governments and the European Union, focus more on the acknowledgement of Youth Pass and other certificates gained through online platforms or courses, non-formal education trainings, as a form of additional education gained after the end of the formal one? So basically, should these online platforms, courses that provide with an additional certificate should be recognized, should be considered as an addition to the formal education? What are your opinions on it? There is no one in specific, but if anyone feels like answering the question. Or not, okay. Yeah, maybe,
I don't have an
Adrian.
answer. I hope it answers your question. Personally, I do believe that the Youth Pass, it somehow complements the formal education that you receive from school. But at the same time, I think it's very important to raise awareness of the Youth Pass so that it is somehow formally recognized all over. For example, if you go to an employer to have it recognized, to have it written in state law, but at the same time, I think it's also important to make sure that it has some sort of area of applicants, even though it is an international certificate.
Yes.
A very brief comment as well, very brief. Of course, certification and formal acknowledgement of skills and knowledge is extremely important. I think that what is to happen is that we will get more flexible into that area as well. I mean, currently it's highly formalized system which recognizes only specific forms of education. I believe the world is going towards more flexibility in that area. Homeschooling, on the Balkans is still not a thing, but it's inevitable to happen sooner or later. So we'll have to rethink how we'll certify knowledge as well.
Okay, so as we're coming to the end of this session, before wrapping it up and giving the final words, if any one of the key speakers would like to have some final remarks or points, now that would be the time. So if not, we could just continue into closing the session. Let me see on the screen. Okay, so I suppose that, yes, you do not have anything additional to add. First of all, let me express my sincerest gratitude for this more than 2 hours. Actually, time flew by. We had some excellent points and discussion on what is the current state of education at the moment, and where is it headed. Then again, we saw that the whole pandemics have seriously affected our societies. So it is not only the effect on the education system, because it is clearly a big one, but it has shown us a whole new perspective when it comes to the social and economical status of the people as well, from having the access to digital and online education, or having a computer, or internet, privacy at the end of the day when there are multiple children within the family, and then gaining access to quality education, because through the comments and through the chat we have seen that the experiences from the young participants are that unfortunately the teaching and administrative staff is not always equipped with the knowledge, with the skills that is needed to conduct this kind of education. And then again, we are definitely forced into this. This is not talking about a variation, whether we like it or not. I mean, there is possibly an opportunity for the next 2 to 3 years before everything stabilizes. I mean, let's be honest, we cannot tell it for sure. But then again, we would have to adapt to the whole methodology. We would have to have more patience when it comes to understanding the processes and growing along with it. And then we would have to adapt accordingly, because at the end of the day, of all the stakeholders that are included in the education, such as the students, the institutions, the schools, the teaching staff, and the parents as well, everyone has to make a joint effort into contributing towards the improvement of the situation, and then providing that in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have a possible future when it comes to transforming our young people into active citizens that will contribute to the society. So then again, we've seen the positive and the negative sides of the current situation, and you know, one can debate whether one should be pessimistic or optimistic, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and we will have to manage it to get through this crisis as well. So once again, thank you to all the participants who were at the third day and the second session of the 18th Youth Conference. So I was very happy to contribute and to moderate. Stay safe and stay tuned for the next sessions, and we will keep in touch. Thank you, and have a good evening and the rest of the weekend. Good night.